Good evening. These are some questions, and I'm not able to answer these because they were all covered in this week's lesson, in this week's class, and they involve more or less going through the class again. And so I would suggest that as soon as the tapes are available of this class, that those who ask these questions study those tapes. Now I say this with a great deal of seriousness because something more is involved than the answer to these particular questions. What is involved is this: that those who have asked them have not caught the point of the work this week. And they should, by all means, hear those tapes, and if necessary, hear them several times until they get the significance of what has happened here this week. Now the first question is, what is the meaning of the law as spoken of as the Lord God in the second chapter of Genesis? This whole week we have been explaining that to be under the law of the second chapter of Genesis means to be under the law of good and evil, and that it refers to cosmic law or karma, that which the Master spoke of as ye sow, so shall ye reap. Or Paul spoke of as, if you sow to the flesh, you will reap corruption. If you sow to the Spirit, you will reap life everlasting. As long as you are under the law of cause and effect, you are under the Lord God. If you accept an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, if you accept any of these human means of solving life's problems, you are under the law. And you come under grace when that period ends. Now, I would imagine that within the next 12 months, or 15 months perhaps, there will be a new book, a new Infinite Way book, and it will be based on the tapes of this class, and it will probably be entitled From Law to Grace. So you see that this entire subject has been covered. This too, just what is this carnal or mortal mind that would seem to let us make a choice between godliness and ungodliness? This mortal mind is the acceptance of the belief of good and evil. Nobody has a mortal mind once they have been freed of the belief of good and evil. When you can look out upon the world and no longer believe that good or evil exists out there, there is no more mortal mind, because it is only mortal mind that sees good and evil, believes in good and evil, and reacts to it. When Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, they were naked, but we're told they didn't know it. That is because they had pure mind, a mind that knew they had bodies, but what of it? They were just normal, natural things, human bodies. Why be ashamed of them? Why be ashamed of any one part more than another? But the next thing we hear is Adam is ashamed. I'm naked. And the Lord says, who told you that you were naked? Because before that he knew nothing about it. Who told you you were naked? Oh, all of a sudden a belief of evil comes in your mind. You start to cover up and hide. What are you covering up? The belief of evil in your own mind. Yours, mine, anybody. We're all in the same boat as humans. We've accepted this belief of good and evil. And because we have a belief of good and evil, we're all covering up. Everybody on the face of the globe is hiding. Hiding themselves or hiding something within themselves for fear of having it brought to light. Why? Because it is good or evil. Now, as long as we have a belief of good or evil, we are the Adam who is hiding. The Adam who is outside or thrown out of the Garden of Eden. Why? Because he has a mortal mind. What is a mortal mind? Anyone's mind that believes in good and evil. Is it necessary to meditate on the Father and I are one, and my grace is thy sufficiency, when we grow to understand the meaning of the first chapter of Genesis? Well, no. After you know the truth, it may not be necessary to meditate on anything at all. But you will find this, that regardless of what extent you know the truth, there will always be some events come up in your life or the life of your patients or students that will force you back to meditation. The Master, Christ Jesus, is assumed to have gone higher in consciousness than any human being of whom we have any record. And he not only had to go aside to meditate and ponder, but sometimes it is reported that he did this for 40 days. And I doubt that we are going to know the truth to any greater extent than he did. I doubt that our demonstration is going to go beyond his. And if he found it necessary at his advanced stage during the 3 years of his ministry to go aside and meditate, I am sure that we will do the same thing. I know that in my work I'm compelled to meditate every single day of the week, every single night of the week, not always on these particular things, but something or other is always given to me to meditate upon. In other words, I cannot feel that I have yet come to the end of the road of spiritual illumination. And until I do, there will be something to ponder. If a member of my family asks help for a severe cold, how should I treat the case or meditate? Now, why did you ask if a member of my family asks help for a severe cold? What difference would it have made if they had asked for help for a severe case of chilblains or athlete's foot or cancer or consumption? Would the treatment have differed? Evidently, there is still a distinction in the mind of the one who asked this question, and they still believe they would treat a cold differently than they would treat a case of unemployment or a case of lonesomeness or marital discord. And actually, that is not the case. Every case is treated the same. If you are going to start, as you undoubtedly will have to for a while, with the mental argument, knowing the truth consciously, you will start with the word God. That makes no difference whether it's a severe cold or a light cold. Makes no difference if it's a blister or blood poisoning. Makes no difference if it's unemployment, lonesomeness. You start the treatment with the word God, and you begin to ponder the nature of God. Why do you do this? You do it because God constitutes man. So anything that's true about God is true about man. There is no such thing as God and man. There is only God manifest as man, expressed as man. Therefore, you never know the truth about man. I'm speaking now of the infinite way. There are other metaphysical approaches where you do, but at no time since the beginning of our work have we ever taught giving a treatment to a man or woman or child. Our treatment is given to God. That is, we treat ourselves about God. The practitioner, the one doing the treating, is the only one who ever receives a treatment. You never treat a person. You never treat a condition. You treat yourself, and your treatment consists of knowing the truth about God. Now, the truth about God, of course, is eternal life. The truth about God is spirit. The truth about God is infinity, eternality, immortality, omnipresence, omnipotence, omniscience. God is life, the only life, and so forth and so on. When you have known the truth about God to the fullest possible extent, you take up the second part of our treatment, which is the nature of error. What is the nature of error? The nature of error, we have learned this week, is a belief in good and evil. Is there any good in this world? No, not even Jesus is good. Why callest thou me good? There is but one good, the Father in heaven. Is there any evil in this world? How can there be if God is infinite and God is good? And so, as you study the class of this week, you will learn that the only reason we have problems is because you think good health is good and bad health is bad. And it isn't true. Good health isn't good and bad health isn't bad. The only truth and the only good is God, and there is no evil. There is no power in any effect because God is all power. Just think of that. There is no power in any effect because God is all power and God is cause. And we have this week been through the point of the subject of oneness. Since there is only one law, there can't be a law of infection or contagion. There can't be a law of sin or disease. There is no law of disease. The only law is God, and God is spirit. Now you see, in all of this treatment, you have never once thought of a person or of a condition. All that you have thought of is, what is the truth about God? And what is the nature of error? And then when you've done that, you get quiet inside and wait. Speak, Lord, thy servant heareth. Wait patiently until you receive an inner assurance that God is on the field, that good is all. There are two parts to our treatment. The one in which we consciously know the truth about God and the nature of error. The second, when we wait on God for the inner assurance that the treatment is effective. Now remember this. I have brought it out over and over again. There is only one reason why the metaphysical movements of the world are diminishing, why the effectiveness of New Thought has come to an end, why what little that is left of it must disappear off the earth. There's only one reason, and that is that they have resolutely determined in the last 40 years to ignore the nature of error. And they've paid the penalty. They can't heal. You have a hard time going up and down this country finding adequate healers, practitioners. A hard time, and that's after 75 years of metaphysical movement, and in spite of the fact that up until 40 years ago, 30 years ago, there were wonderful healers in this country. Wonderful healers in this country. You could find them all the way from Portland, Maine to Portland, Oregon, all the way from the Canadian border to the Gulf of Mexico. Almost every city had fine healers and lecturers traveling up and down this country, bringing a New Thought movement, a unity movement, and a Christian Science movement to great heights. What's happened to all that? Where are these lecturers? Where are these teachers? Where are these practitioners? Gone with the wind. Why? They have refused in their treatment. They have refused in their writings to take up this nature of error. That is why our practitioners who are already in the work are doing fine work. And those that come will do even finer work. They are not afraid to look this matter of error in the face and not ignore it, and not just turn away and say there is no error. It's a lot of nonsense. This whole world is filled with error. That's why we're all here. But when you know the nature of error, so that you come to a place where you no longer fear it, where you absolutely know that the only reason it has power is because you give it the power, the universal mind gives it the power of good or evil. When you individually withdraw it and say, you are not good and you are not evil, you have nothing of good in you and nothing of evil in you. You exist only as an appearance, as an illusion, as a nothingness. When you come to that point in your treatment, you can rest, and very quickly you'll find that the Father will give you the assurance that all is well. And it really makes no difference what you're treating. You can be treating insanity, you can be treating nervousness, you can be treating any form of discord the world has ever known. You can be treating capital and labor cases, management and union cases. You can be treating law cases. But you don't have to know anything about them. You don't have to know who's involved or what the issues are. You don't have to know what part of the body pains or how long the person has been unemployed. None of that enters into this treatment, because we are not treating medically or psychologically. We are treating from the standpoint of, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. What is the truth? God constitutes your being and mine. God constitutes individual you and me. God is the life of you. God is the mind of you. God is the soul of you. God is even the substance of your body. God looked at this whole world that he created and found it good. There is not God and a universe. There is not a God sitting off somewhere looking down upon a universe. God is the very essence and nature and law of the universe. God is the substance of all form. God is the reality of being. God constitutes you and me, the good people of the world and the evil people of the world, the alive people of the world and the dead people of the world. God constitutes our being. That's the first part of the truth that you must know. God. You have no life apart from God, nor has your patient or your student or the prisoner in the jailhouse. God constitutes your being. God is life, and therefore God is all life, perfect life, eternal life, harmonious life. God alone is being, and God is all being. Now, after you've declared that, you still have the appearance of the cold or the consumption or the cancer or the unemployment. So let's deal with that. And as we deal with that, we'll find out that while the world doesn't know this, the metaphysical world revealed it 75 years ago. And it should have been our guide ever since, and in some few cases it has been. And that is this: whatever the name or the nature of the appearance, it is not truth, it is not constituted of truth, it has no law, it has no substance, it has no being, it is illusion, it is nothingness, it is without law to support it, without cause, it is without substance, it is without reality. Then what made it? The universal acceptance of good and evil. It began all the way back with Adam. He was in the Garden of Eden where everything was perfect. But along came the knowledge of good and evil, and he was thrown out. That ended his harmony. That began his earning his living by the sweat of his brow. That began bringing forth children in pain. That began all of the discords that we know on earth today, being thrown out of the Garden of Eden because he knew good and evil. Now we have been thrown out of the Garden of Eden, and we are out here in a world struggling for a living, still bringing forth children through pain, still going through sin, disease, and death. Why? We still know good and evil. We still call some things good and call other things evil. When you come to a place when you can look out upon this world and realize there's no good or evil out there, all of the good there is in the invisible God. There can't be evil because of the infinite nature of God. Now you're looking out upon a world and you're inside of the Garden of Eden again. There's no more hypnotism, no more mesmerism. There's no more sin tempting you. There's no more disease tempting you. Now you have come to a place in consciousness where there's no such thing as calendars on the wall ticking off your age. Day goes by and night, and day and night, and day and night, but you're the same age every day. Why? Because it's only the belief of good and evil that says tomorrow makes you different than today. There is no good and evil in this world, and accepting good and evil through our race out of Eden. To get back into harmony individually, and remember that you can't help your family or your friends or your patients or your students until you have helped yourself, until you yourself have gotten back at least part way into Eden, at least have 1 foot in Eden before you start out healing. And the only way you can do that is when you are in a position where you recognize that the world is only suffering because of a belief of good and evil. And the moment you stop believing in good and evil, the suffering stops. I've witnessed it in too many cases, so that I don't have to hesitate in telling you this. I know this. I know this. That as long as I can be made to believe in good and evil, I cannot bring out healing. When I come to that place in consciousness where I recognize that disease has no law, disease has no foundation, because there is no such thing as an evil power. Where would it come from if God is infinite? But as long as we believe in an evil power, as long as we believe in a negative power, as long as we believe in two powers, we can't be helped. We cannot help others. So you see, all of this treatment that has gone on for nearly a half hour has never once taken in the name of a patient or the nature of their disease, and that has been going on here all week. And already a half a dozen of you have told me of healings that have taken place this week. And that's without my knowing your name, and that's without knowing your disease, and that's without knowing anything about you. Why? Because I wasn't treating you. I have sat up here this entire week knowing the truth about God and knowing the truth about the nature of error as nothingness. Knowing the truth of the nature of error as merely a belief in good and evil, a belief that has no substance, no cause, a belief that has no foundation. And just sitting here knowing that has benefited those of you who have been benefited, and it will go on benefiting. Always in the past, I have had letters weeks and months after a class telling me of healings that took place in the class but weren't recognized for a week or two afterward, or didn't manifest completely until a week or two afterward. Why? Because wherever I am, there is a consciousness going on within me, an awareness of God as constituting infinite being. Your being, my being. And it makes no difference whether I'm in my metaphysical teaching work or healing work, or whether I'm traveling around the country in airplanes or automobiles. I'm living always in the realization of God constituting this universe, and looking out and beholding that nowhere is there any power of good or evil. Nowhere is there anything embodying good or evil. God alone is the good. And it is for this reason that over and over again we have these experiences of healing even where they aren't asked for. Yes, I got into an airplane in Melbourne, Australia, on the way to the other coast. We had to stop at Adelaide. The lady got out at Adelaide, and when I came to Adelaide the following week and met her, she told me that she got on that plane with chills and fever after being 2 days in bed with flu, and got off the plane completely well. You see, this is not personal. There's nothing personal about this. This is the nature of truth. And you just don't turn it on and off when somebody asks for help. You have to live in it, morning, noon, and night. Never can you accept evil as real. Always must you abide in the truth that God constitutes individual being. You may see an intoxicated person reeling down the street. You may see a man stealing a wallet. You can't be as the others are. You can't sit in judgment and condemnation and say, oh, there's a drunk, or oh, there's a thief. You can't do that. You have come out from among them and become separate. You are of the brotherhood of Christ. You cannot judge. You cannot condemn. You cannot call names the way Adam did. You have to stand fast in a spiritual realization. God constitutes individual being, and error, regardless of its name or nature, has no existence, has no reality, no law, nothing to sustain it, nothing to maintain it. Why? Because it only exists where people believe in good and evil. And if we do not believe in good or evil, then the error disappears right in front of our eyes. But don't think that you can turn this on or off like you can your water tap. Don't think you can just declare these things in a treatment and then live contrary to them. It'll never be effective. You can't have office hours as a practitioner except 24 hours a day. And then you may even get to the place where our students did last year, when some of them told me that we are going to form an infinite way union, and we're going on strike. We're going to strike for a 28-hour day and an 8-day week. We need it. It takes all of that time to know the truth, to really and truly be effective Don't think you can be effective by living a lie and occasionally knowing the truth. You've got to know the truth and live the truth. You've got to constantly watch every impression that comes to your awareness and realize that no matter what its appearance, don't let it hypnotize you or mesmerize you into believing that there's good or evil. There is no good or evil. There's only God. What is meant by the second coming of the Christ? Well, of course, that has, I believe, a theological meaning and presumably has reference to a belief that Jesus Christ will come again as he came 2,000 years ago. I know very little about that. Our interpretation of the second coming of the Christ would be something like this. We acknowledge that Christ was visibly manifest as Jesus. And we acknowledge that Christ can again become visibly manifest as your individual being and mine, and that it does become visibly manifest as the Christ touches individual consciousness. Now, if we think of the first coming of Christ appearing on earth as Jesus, then the second coming is when it comes to you and to me. Actually, of course, you know that was not the first coming of the Christ 2,000 years ago, because he very definitely stated himself, before Abraham was, I am. And so that wasn't his first coming. When he said before Abraham was, remember that Jesus was a Jew, and that Abraham was the father of the Jewish race, the beginning of the Jewish race. So what he was saying was, before there was a Jewish race, I am. Will prayers for our loved ones who have passed on help them? Of course they will. Of course they will. No one has ever died, and understanding prayers, true prayers as we know it, will benefit those that are here on earth, those who have left this plane, and those who have not yet entered this plane. Of course, I must remind you of Mark Twain saying, when he arrived in Europe after having been ill on board ship, and the reporters met him and said that they received cables that all America was praying for him in his illness, and he said, won't you cable back and say that I'm sure that their prayers have not hurt me? And of course, that is what I must say to you about prayer as it's understood in this world. I don't think they'll hurt anybody, and I'm certainly convinced they won't help anybody. Mostly, they are just leaves in the wind, going no place, doing nothing, not benefiting anyone, not harming anyone, just keeping people in ignorance and superstition of truth. But prayer, when it is communion with God, where it is first of all an acknowledgement of God's allness, omnipotence, omnipresence, omniscience, where it is followed by the realization that God is the only power, and beside God there is no other power, there is neither good nor evil power, there is only God power. And then when that is followed by that period of waiting for the Spirit of God to touch one, those prayers are effective. They're effective when we sit in each other's presence. They are just as effective if we are 10,000 miles apart. They are just as effective to those who have gone beyond our eyesight, beyond our plane of consciousness. They are just as effective to those not yet born. I have witnessed in my experience young girls and young men who have been a part of my work, unmarried girls and boys, who have been a part of my practice, who have come to some measure of this understanding, who have married, and who have had the most wonderful families and the most wonderful family experiences, because their communion with God touched their consciousness and touched the consciousness of the unborn and brought forth fruit after its own kind. I have witnessed families now for 27 years who have had metaphysical work in their families and watched the difference. On the whole, I'm speaking of. There are always exceptions, but on the whole, witnessed what takes place in their families and in their family life as against those who do not have metaphysical understanding brought into their prayer work. Always remember this. It is understanding prayer, that is, the prayer of communion, the prayer of contact with God, that brings God to our experience. It is not repeating of words or thinking of thoughts. Those prayers are mostly wasted. Those prayers are mostly superstitions. But, and the proof of that is that mankind is a branch that is cut off and withereth. But whenever you find an individual or a family who elevate their concept of prayer to that of communion with God, actually bringing God into their experience, then you find transformed lives. And they not only transform their own lives, but those of members of their family who are receptive to it, those who have gone on, and those who are not yet born. Please explain Revelation chapter 3, 15th verse. Him that overcometh will I make a pillar of the temple of my God, and he shall go no more out. And I will write upon him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, which is New Jerusalem. Well, you know, that whole passage explains itself, doesn't it? When you have overcome the belief in good and evil, do you not see that you're back in Eden? And your name now is God? The consciousness of God? What other consciousness have you than God when you no longer believe in good and evil? The only consciousness that is separate and apart from God consciousness, or what we call Christ consciousness, is that consciousness which entertains the belief of good and evil. What constitutes Christ consciousness? What constituted the consciousness of Jesus Christ? His ability to say to Pilate, "Thou hast no power over me," except it came from God. To touch a leper. Why? Leprosy, you have no power over me. His power to go to thieves, adulterers, who else? And say, "Neither do I condemn thee. I don't know any evil, so I don't condemn thee. There's no evil in my mind. I don't see any evil any place. I don't condemn thee. Go and sin no more, because you believe in evil. It'll come back upon you. I don't believe in evil, so I can release you." Do you not see that your consciousness this minute, if it is entertaining beliefs of good and evil, is mortal consciousness? But that your consciousness this minute, if you release yourself from that belief, is God consciousness? Then go and look in the mirror and you'll see you're the same person outwardly. And all your friends will think you're the same person. That's why they were able in the old days to say, "Phew, this man, why, this is just our neighbor Jesus, the son of Mary, the carpenter." Because looking at him outwardly, that's what he was. But inwardly, he wasn't the carpenter or the son of Mary. No, inwardly, he was the Christ. Why? He had attained Christ consciousness. What is Christ consciousness? Your consciousness. when it no longer believes in good and evil. You know, that's a strange song to be singing over and over and over, but it's the truth that each one of us must learn. Your mind would settle down into meditation just as quickly as Jesus' mind if you had no belief of good and evil. Why? Don't you know that everything you think about is either good or evil, or you wouldn't be thinking about it? Do you know that you never think of the past except to think of some occasion that is extraordinarily good or extraordinarily evil? If it weren't for that, you'd never think of the past. Don't you know that nobody ever thinks of the future unless in terms of something that they're fearing as evil or something that they expect to be very, very good? We look forward perhaps to a trip to Europe or around the world, and that's very good, so we look into the future. Or we're fearing death, or we're fearing the punishment for a sin. And so we're looking into the future with fear. But if you weren't fearing some evil, and you weren't anticipating some good, now tell me what business you'd have in the future. You wouldn't have any. You just settle back right now and be at peace. And so it is, I can promise you this. No matter what it is you're thinking of, just realize that it has no elements in it of good or evil, and watch how quickly it will disappear from your thought. People over and over say, I can't stop thinking. I can't stop thoughts going on in my mind. I know they can't, as long as there's good and evil in their thought. But when there's no good and evil there, I know from experience there's nothing to think about. Well, then you say, does your mind become a blank? Indeed, no. It becomes filled with beauty. You just look out on these beautiful flowers and love them, and then you begin to perceive how they got here, and you perceive the love and the gratitude that brought them here, and you got that to think about. You look up at the stars, the moon, and you begin to enjoy their beauty, and then the first thing you know, you're aware of the rhythm, the orderliness of it. Oh, if you knew how many nights I have sat on the beach in Hawaii and looked at that Southern Cross, and watch how every night it comes up in the same place, moves up to its top, comes over to its side, every night the same way. Well, you couldn't keep watching that for a dozen nights without becoming aware of the fact that behind that Southern Cross there is a something moving it in a regular rhythm and a regular order. Oh, your mind never becomes a blank, but now you become aware of all the beauties in the world, and joys and graces, all of the rhythms, all of the forms of beauty. And you can admire those, but they don't disturb your thoughts because they're neither good nor evil. You don't have to have them, and you don't have to get rid of them. There's just, the mind is filled with beauty. Filled with beauty. You draw to yourself the great literature of the world, the beautiful literature of the world, and you live in it without a trace of fear, and also without a trace of anything that would involve good or evil. It just involves beauty, harmony, orderliness. No, your mind is filled once it doesn't have to worry about good and evil. Once it no longer has to think about the past or the future. It can live in an eternal now. But only when you have completely released yourself from the power of good and evil. When we recognize our errors and have learned not to condemn ourselves for them, why don't they then automatically disappear? Is it because deep down somewhere we still want them? We still think they are going to do something for us? Probably that is one thing. But another thing is this: coming into the intellectual perception of these errors doesn't always destroy them. You will remember there are two parts to our prayers, two essentials. One is knowing the truth. The second is that inner stillness until the voice of God speaks or the presence of God makes itself known. And so it is sometimes after we have recognized our own errors, recognized what it is that's troubling us, we still do not make the grade until that Spirit comes upon us. However, as a result of this class, it should be much easier to drop the errors of our experience, because now we have what we didn't have before this current year. We have the definite teaching that we are troubled only because we are accepting something as good or evil. And as long as you're accepting it as evil, your errors I'm speaking of, you want to get rid of them. Once you begin to know that they contain no evil, they'll disappear of themselves. You see, therein is the difference in our metaphysical healing work and others. We never have a disease to get rid of. We never have a sin to get rid of. We never have anything to overcome. Our work is merely the recognition that there is no evil in that which is presenting itself to us as evil, any more than there is anything good in that which presents itself to us as good. Ours is arising above the pairs of opposites. Ours is not an attempting to exchange bad humanhood for good humanhood, or sick humanhood for well humanhood. Ours is a continuous seeing through the human appearance to the spiritual reality, and that is easily done once you begin to perceive that your major principle is not accepting good or evil. If you accept your errors as an evil, they will cling to you. If you resist evil, it will cling to you. If you gradually come to take the attitude, so what? It is not an evil. It has no evil. There is no evil. There is no power of good or evil. I have been fearing something, wanting to get rid of something, which in and of itself is not evil. When you come to that state of consciousness, you find how it disappears. Now we must have just a few minutes of rest to absorb this. One of the very important points in the message of the infinite way is this: that good does not come from God. God itself is the good appearing in form, so that it is absolutely incorrect to believe that God can send supply or give supply, or that God can send health or give health, or that God can give safety or security or provide safety or security. There is really no such thing, and you will deprive yourself of supply and of health and of safety and of security if you keep looking to God for them, because there is no way for God to give you them. God is infinite, and therefore God is health. God is supply. God is safety and security. So that when you live and move and have your being in God consciousness, God awareness, if you know that there is neither good nor evil, God constitutes all being, you will find that you have health, you have supply, you have safety, you have security. I have told a previous class of the metaphysical teacher and her husband in England, who during the Blitz of London refused to have a bomb-proof shelter, even though they were in the midst of all the bombing, and instead stood the fire watch at night during the Blitz, so that their neighbors who did not have their sense of security could remain in their bomb-proof shelters. But this couple would have none of that. They walked the streets during the Blitz, doing fire watch. And they went through the entire Blitz unharmed, and their home unharmed. And in case you think that that was just luck, let me tell you that on one night the bombs hit the bomb-proof shelter of their next-door neighbor and wiped out a family. And those same bombs flew over their home out onto streetcar tracks and missed their home and missed them out on the street. Now, they didn't need a bomb-proof shelter because they had the only invincible bomb-proof shelter. They were in God, and bombs can't reach in God. And they had God in them, so that if a bomb had hit them, it wouldn't have hurt them, because you can't hurt God. And so it is that the Infinite Way tries to reveal to you that if you have this consciousness of God, you have health because God is the health of your countenance. God is the health. God doesn't give it, God doesn't send it, God doesn't impart it. God is it. Have God and you have health. Nor does God send supply to anyone. But the omnipresence of God is the omnipresence of supply. You can't be in God's presence and in the presence of lack. That would be fantastic, wouldn't it, if you could be in God's presence and in the presence of lack at the same time. So I'd like to tell you of a healing that was brought to our attention this week. Just through that realization, a student suffering with, well, we call it sore bronchial tubes, and meditating, and then realizing that there can't be God and bronchial tubes. There just can't be that. God is. I am constitutes all being. God, I am constitutes bronchial tubes, or any other tubes, or any other thing that exists. And the healing was instantaneous. Now you see, that is because the realization dawned that God and its creation is one, not two. There isn't a God and a creation. God constitutes creation. All creation is made up of God. And so when you realize that God isn't going to send help or supply to you, when you stop trying to demonstrate these things and center your whole heart and soul on demonstrating a realization of God, demonstrating the conscious awareness of God, the consciousness of God's presence, then you'll find that God's presence is itself the health, the harmony, the supply, the safety, the security. Even an airplane can't fall if it's in God's presence. How is it in God's presence? It can only be brought there through the consciousness of an individual consciously aware of God's presence. It's all a matter of consciousness. Otherwise, it's a human race cut off from God that withereth. But when there is one individual present, or 10 righteous men in a city, realizing God's presence, then the presence of God is the safety and the security and the peace and the joy and the health and the harmony and the allness of the situation. And so the Infinite Way says, with all you're getting, get the realization of God. With all you're getting, get an understanding of the nature of God. With all you're getting, get God's grace consciously revealing itself within you. There is no other demonstration to make. No one in this world will ever have to demonstrate health or peace or rest or supply or safety. Once they start on the spiritual path of realizing God. If you have 3 opportunities during the day to realize God's presence, take advantage of it. For the rest of the day will be filled with the good things of God. If you have 20 opportunities in the day to sit down for even 1 minute and realize where I am, God is. Where God is, I am. I am ever in that presence, and that presence is ever in me. Do it, because the rest of the day you will find the things of God added unto you. All that you shall eat and drink, and wherewithal you shall be clothed and transported and vacationed, and all the rest of these things are added unto you. Don't spend any time trying to demonstrate anything. Spend whatever available time you have for spiritual things to realize the presence of God, to ponder in your mind the nature of God, and to continuously remind yourself that there is neither good nor evil anywhere on earth. There is neither good nor evil. So you're not seeking good and not trying to get rid of evil. God is, and that's enough. God is, and I am. All that God is, I am. Where God is, I am. Inseparable, indivisible. Because I am convinced that this particular class has not only gone beyond any Infinite Way class ever given, because I am convinced that this particular class is going to be the subject of all that is ever written or spoken on the message of the Infinite Way in the future, I will say to you, avail yourselves of every opportunity to hear it. As many times as you can. It is of far greater importance than I can possibly make you believe at this moment. Only when you see it in operation, when you see what it is doing for you, will you begin to appreciate the enormity of the experience you've had this week and of what has been revealed here. This is really it. No one has ever heard me say that in a class before. This is really it. This is what I have been dreaming of for years, and it finally has come to pass. Until it is in print, and it will ultimately be there, although I won't be in a hurry, because I know how little the world is prepared for what has taken place this week. But certainly it will be in print. But until then, take advantage of every opportunity you can get to hear it. Over and over. Hear it. Hear it. Get it into your consciousness that what we are revealing is no demonstration but the demonstration of the realization of God. And the demonstration of Christ consciousness consists of being free of the belief of good and evil. Whatever measure of good there is in the consciousness of Jesus Christ rests in his ability to break the mesmerism that binds men to the belief in good and evil. Whatever quality of Christliness there is in my consciousness or yours consists of our ability to break the mesmerism for our friends, our neighbors, our patients and students that binds them to the belief of good and evil. When you have broken that mesmeric suggestion, you have set them free. Thank you.